All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Meet the Fleet. My name is Ipsita, and I am a public programs intern for UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. We conduct research, education, and outreach for healthy coastal ecosystems and communities. All right, so at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Todd to start the program.
Hello, everybody. My name is Todd Recicar. I'm one of the 3 captains here at the UGA Marine Extension Center and Aquarium. I'm going to introduce you to the RVC Dog, which we're on board right now inside the wheelhouse. Just a little terminology for you. RV stands for research vessel. So the RVC Dog was acquired in the early to mid 80s and is used as a research vessel, education and outreach, and conservation. And I want to introduce you to some of the equipment we have on board. And later on, Dodie's going to talk to you about some of the research that we conduct on board the RVC Dog. So inside the wheelhouse here, you can come on inside. This is a 43-foot vessel. We have lab space, sink space, storage. Down below, we have bunks for overnight trips. So there's several bunks down below. You can take a peek there. And over here, we have the helm. So this is the main operations station. This is where we operate the vessel from. We have one single engine in this boat. We have shifters and throttles, the steering wheel, and we have autopilot. And some of the electronics we have a couple of VHF radios that we use to communicate with other vessels or shore stations. We have a chart plotter, GPS, and radar here. And we have a PA system so that when we're conducting education on the back deck, we can talk to everybody through speakers. And so it's amplified and you can hear over the sound of the engine. Over here, we have a chart table. So if you look, you have these nautical charts. We use these nautical charts for navigating, knowing where we're going, kind of planning our routes. We can look for shallows or hazards in the water by looking at these charts. And these same charts are what you'll see on our electronic chart plotter here. So they're very handy in helping us figure out distance, how long it's going to take us to get somewhere based on our speed, some shallows we might have to look for, and even just looking for good research areas, we'll use these nautical charts. So if you follow me to the back deck, we'll talk about some of the machinery we have on the back deck. Come on through. All right, so now we're on the back deck of the Sea Dawg. And if you look back here, you see this A-shaped frame that goes over the back deck. That's called an A-frame. That A-frame is run by hydraulics from this trawl winch. And we can make this A-frame go back and forth by lifting and lowering this lever and deploying instruments off of the back of the vessel. The winch helps us to lift heavy equipment using this wire cable. Wire cable goes down to these trawl doors. And this is the trawl net that we use. This is a 26-foot wide trawl net. And these doors are about 4 feet long by 2 feet tall. And these are actually small doors compared to what larger shrimp boats use. This is a much smaller version. So these doors help to open the mouth of the net up. When we drag the back of this net out of the back of the boat, the last thing to go out are these doors. And then the doors hit the water and spread open and make the net nice and wide to help catch things like shrimp and fish. After we catch the organisms that we're going after, we haul this big catch in the cod end, and I'm going to show you a mini version of this in just a second. But the bag at the end is called a cod end. We'll lift it up over the back deck, and we'll lower it into this tank. This tank is usually full of water, and we'll open the bag, and that way we can keep things alive and sort through them. If we want to keep certain species alive for our exhibit in the aquarium, we can then select them out of the tank and put them into this live well. And this tank is full of water as well. And then other species we'll keep for food for the aquarium exhibits. And so we'll sort through and set tables and trays, excuse me, on the engine hatch over here. And we'll show you that in just a second. And we'll sort through the species and count them and catalog them. And then we'll secure those in a cooler, and that'll be food for the exhibit. So over here on the engine hatch, this is a mock-up version of that trawl net that I was just showing you. It's a mini version. It's just used for demonstration. And I just want to show you kind of how they're laid out and how they work. And Dodie's going to go over this more in detail. But if you see these doors, just a small version of what I showed you on that table, when we lower the net in the water, this cod end goes in first. And we lower it off the back of the boat. And this trails over the back. And then we use that A-frame and the trawl winch to put these doors over the back. And then when these doors hit the water, the force of the water as the boat is going forward causes the doors to go wide like this. And then you have a nice open mouth of the net. All right. One last thing I want to show you. We don't have one of these on our net because we don't pull the trawl net very long. But for nets that are pulled over 15 minutes, they have what's called a turtle excluder device, or a TED. You can see it woven in here, this black device. It's woven into the net. And the idea is that any big fish or sharks or turtles that come into the net, we're not going after those. We don't want to catch those. So they will deflect off of these bars and come out a little pocket here and be released safely. And then the fish and shrimp that you're going after go between the bars and go into the cod end. So it's a neat way to save larger species that we're not going after. This blue device up here is an actual TED. This is the real size of a TED that's used in the larger nets. So pretty neat device that saved thousands and thousands of turtles and sharks. And it's very effective, and you don't lose many shrimp and fish. All right. Well, is there any questions about the vessel or life as a captain?
Yeah, so we did have a question come up. When was the TED, or turtle excluder device, painted blue?
Sounds like somebody's been on board before. Yeah, that's a good question. So that it used to be gray, but earlier this year we painted it blue just so you could see it and demonstrate while we have groups on board. So just a few months ago. Glad they noticed.
How often do you stay overnight on the boat?
They used to do overnight cruises a lot more years ago. Since I've been here, we haven't done any overnight, but we do have one planned in a couple of weeks. So I would say once every year or two, we'll do some overnight trips, but we're looking to do more.
Awesome. And then we had a question. Todd, what is your background? How did you get to have such a cool job?
Well, thank you. I think it's a cool job as well. I was always interested in the outdoors and being on the water. I grew up spending a good bit of time on recreational fishing boats. And I just always had a fascination for exploring, throwing the cast net, beachcombing. And I decided that the best thing for me was to go to school and get a degree in biology. I did a lot of different research jobs after school. And I found out that I really enjoyed facilitating the science. And of course, I like being on boats. So I went and got my captain's license and got all the different certifications required to to become a captain, such as first aid, CPR, and some other certificates. And I just enjoyed working on boats, helping science, and this is where I ended up, and it's been a fantastic career.
That's amazing. And then we had one more question. What kind of fish do you catch for the aquarium?
There are so many species here, dozens and dozens of fish that we have caught just in our local waters. Some of them we have used for exhibit if they're unique, or if we need more of a schooling fish in the tanks. We'll work with our aquarists that work behind the scenes, and each time we go out on a trawl, we will ask them what species they're looking for, what are they interested in, and we'll keep an eye out for them as we catch things. But if you can think of any inshore species in the Georgia waters, we have probably caught it, from drum, croaker, sharks, stingrays, even invertebrates like crabs and shrimp, trout, spadefish, moonfish, bumpers. I could keep going on, but we only have so much time. But if there are any specific species you're wondering about, I could let you know if we've caught them.
And then one last question. So how often do you get seasick?
It's been a long time since I've been seasick. We don't go offshore a lot on this vessel, but when I do, I'll take some seasick prevention medication if it's going to be rough. Years ago, I worked offshore a lot, and when I knew it was going to be rough, I would take this preventative medicine, but it's been many years since I've been seasick. But I recommend, if you're going to go anywhere offshore and you're not sure if you get seasick, to take preventative medicine. You better be safe than sorry.
Definitely. And that looks like all the questions we have from the audience as of right now. If you have any more questions, feel free to add it into the chat box. But currently, those are all the questions that we got.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining me on the Sea Dawg. And those are great questions. I'm going to send you up top, and you guys are going to do a quick survey, and then you're going to meet Dodie and talk more about some of the research that we've conducted on the Sea Dawg.
All right, so we have a poll for you, and I'm going to launch it right now. So what part of the RVC Dawg is the trawl net deployed from? Is it the bow, the stern, the galley, or the head? And it looks like we have a bunch of answers coming in. Thank you to everyone who's voting. And I'm going to end the poll in about 5 seconds, so get your answers in. It's okay if you don't know, just guess. It never hurts. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now. And you guys did a great job. We had some people say bow and some people say stern, and the answer is stern, which is the back of the boat. I did not know this information before doing this, doing our rehearsals and knowing the program. So don't worry if you got it wrong, because we're all here to learn. All right, so at this time, I think I'm going to hand it over to Dodie if she's ready to start the next part of the program.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and be topside today. What I'd like to do, first of all, is kind of walk you through the process of our trawl. Todd took you on a tour of the RVC Dawg. So what we'd like to do now is just kind of walk you through the process if you've never been on one. So at the beginning of the trawls, we always do a safety talk. And that just basically is man overboard drills, and we talk about life jackets, and that's just to keep the participants safe. So once we head out, most likely what we do is we head out to some of the nearby sounds and rivers. We have gone offshore as far as 3, even 5 miles and beyond, but we tend to stick in the sounds and the Wilmington River and the Skidaway River. So here we have the deployment of the net, and Todd talked about the otter doors, how they separate. And when the boat is moving forward, of course, that helps keep those otter boards open. Of course, that's what you want when you're trawling. You want to have that net as open as possible. So once the net's deployed, we deploy it for about 10 to 12 minutes. Todd mentioned that we don't have a TED, a turtle exclusion device on our trawl net. And that basically allows us to just do short trawls. And while the net is deployed, students who are on board take water quality samples. And so if we think about some of the water quality parameters that we test, they look at salinity. That's how salty the water is. They look at dissolved oxygen, and they also look at temperature. So while the net is deployed, again, we take those water quality parameters. Students also go up to the helm and work with Captain Todd, and what they're interested in getting is collecting some data on the GPS coordinates. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But they're also interested in documenting the site, the date, and what the tides are doing. Is it an incoming tide or is it an outgoing tide? So once the net's deployed, we bring it up 10 to 12 minutes. And this is just some footage that we have of the net being pulled in. You see the doors right behind the stern of the boat, and at the far left, you'll see the cod and eventually come up. We have a special permit through the Department of Natural Resources that allows us to do these trawls, whether it be for research or for education. So once the trawl is brought up, you'll see Todd bringing up that cod end, and that's the very end of the net, and that's where the collection is, where all the fish kind of get funneled back. So once we bring the cod end up, we put it into the water table. So here's some footage of the cod end. This one is a good catch. That's a pretty full cod end. You see to the right, Todd and Kayla are releasing the lines on the cod end, and that basically dumps the catch into that water table. And the water table has river water flowing through it so that the organisms don't heat up. So this is kind of a perspective from the top of that culling table or culling bucket that we have. We run river water through it. And you see in this image, you see horseshoe crabs, you see a few different species of fish. So we get anything from invertebrates to vertebrates. So once the cod end is dumped into that water table, you see Todd kind of culling through that sample. We have, again, that permit that allows us to do that. Most of the larger megafauna, like the sharks and the sea turtles and the larger stingrays, actually we release right away if we were to catch them in the net. And you see to the right, Todd's releasing a stingray. So a lot of the organisms, we tell students and participants that join us on the Sea Dawg that the animals don't go to waste. We use these organisms in a number of ways. One, if we find some exciting different types of fish or invertebrates that we could use in the aquarium, we'll save them for the curators to put on exhibit at a later date. If we collect organisms, we collect organisms for research. We have black gill studies going on. We've also collected fish for microplastic studies. We also collect the fish to feed the aquarium animals. The aquarium animals need food, of course, and so we save the shrimp and the squid. So again, a lot of these species that we collect, they don't go to waste. And some of the organisms we even save for teaching, say for fish dissections. So at this point, we kind of sit the students around that culling table. And this is a really good opportunity for them to get a firsthand look at the organisms. They're able to look at them, they're able to touch them. And it's a good opportunity to really get up close and personal with these invertebrates and vertebrates. So once we get to that, one of the requirements of the permit that we do have is that we have to report the species that we've collected, and we also have to document the number of species. So this is where the students become an integral part of our education sort of research facet of this program, is that they do all the work. They love separating the fish, and then we basically talk to them about the organisms. So they learn a little bit about the natural history, and they learn identification. And then of course they have to count and document the species and the numbers. So what we're gonna do is, at this point, we actually went out on a trawl this morning, and we collected some organisms that we'd like to showcase for you this morning live. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to my camera. We've got a water table set up topside on the dock, and we've put some pretty cool organisms in that water table. So we'll take a few minutes. Again, if you have questions while I'm talking, you can put in the chat box some questions, and Ipsita will respond to that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead to my live camera. And you should be able to see the water table. And again, let me know, Ipsita, if you can't hear me, okay? But what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about some of the organisms. This morning, as I mentioned, we just went right out here on the Skidaway River, and we caught both invertebrates and some vertebrates. So I might start with some of the invertebrates. These, of course, are animals without backbones. So one of the most interesting organisms that we pulled up today is this organism. It doesn't look like an organism, does it? It looks more like a plant. Does anybody know what this organism is? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat box.
We had a bunch of answers come in for coral and a more specific answer for fire coral.
Ah, those are all good guesses. This is actually a sponge, if you can believe it. This is called redbeard sponge. And sponges are really cool organisms. They have pores. They're able to filter water. And that's basically pulling water through their tissues. But redbeard sponge is also, they call it redbeard sponge because it kind of looks like a beard, doesn't it? If you look up close, lots of organisms use this as a habitat. And redbeard sponge usually starts out as some small pieces. They might be, you might find them if you explore the underside of your dock, or you explore a piling to the dock, or maybe a shell that you find. So they start pretty small, but then as they grow, they become these elongated branches. But sponges, all shapes, colors, all different sizes. You can have tubular sponges, you can have encrusting sponges. And sponges are basically sessile. They're sessile organisms, meaning that they're attached, and they're filter feeders. So again, they pull water in, they extract the dissolved oxygen, the organisms, whatever they need in order to grow. So that's redbeard sponge. So we'll move on to another invertebrate. How about this one? What's this look like to folks? Anybody have a guess as to what this is? This is an invertebrate as well. Anybody have a guess?
We did have a guest come in for coral, and then another one for tunicate. And then one more person asked, like, is that dead man's fingers? So those are our three guesses.
Okay, awesome. The answer is this is a rubbery bryozoan. So this is a bryozoan, it's an animal, and sometimes people do call it dead man's finger. So whoever guessed that is correct. But another name is rubbery bryozoan. So we've got sponges and we've got bryozoans, again, two different invertebrates. let's kind of switch to another organism. This is a really interesting one. One of my favorites. Let me see if I can show this to you. Any guesses as to what this is?
Yes, so we have many guesses coming in for squid and then another one for cuttlefish.
All right, good. Well, this is actually a squid. Cuttlefish are related to squid. This is a really interesting organism. If you watch it, if you're able to watch it in an aquarium or just hold it up, you can see that the change in color. Squid have chromatophores, these little color cells. And so as we rub that, sometimes they get darker, but these chromatophores expand and contract. And that allows them to sort of this form of camouflage. So they're able to camouflage themselves. Squid are one of the few invertebrates that make up the nekton community. And what I mean by nekton community is those organisms that can actively move, like fish, sea turtles, sharks, from one place to another. Squid have these eyes here. What's a defense mechanism other than chromatophores? Can anybody think of a second way that they defend themselves? There's a couple more. What do they have?
We had many guesses come in for ink, a guess for beak, and yeah, those are the two guesses that have come in so far.
Those are correct. Yep. So the squid, one defense mechanism is to ink. Okay, they were able to release ink, and that confuses the predator. If we look closely at the mouthpiece, you can see in the center of those tentacles, that dark spot right there, that's the beak. That's a powerful beak that it uses to capture its prey. So again, that's a squid. We're going to go ahead and release that one. All right, I've got another organism here I want to talk about. Here we go. How about this organism? Who knows what this one is? It's the #1 commercial fishery here on the coast of Georgia. That's a hint. Any guesses?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of guesses come in for shrimp and then a more specific guess for white shrimp.
Very good. Yep, this is a white shrimp. I mentioned that shrimp is the #1 commercial fishery here on the coast of Georgia. And we have 3 species. We have white, brown, and pink. And shrimp are especially adapted for an aquatic environment. We'll talk a little bit about its parts here. If we look at the eyes, it has eyes on stalks. This, on the front part, let's see if I can point that out. You see that spine? That's actually called the rostrum. That helps protect it a little bit. Of course, most people are familiar with this part of the shrimp as opposed to the head. They have walking legs. They've got 5 pair of walking legs. And then behind that, they have 5 pair of swimming legs. They have a telson or tail. These are called uropods. And that allows them to swim from one place to another. They can walk on the bottom of the rivers and the sounds, but they can swim as well, not very actively. If we think about the life cycle of the shrimp, okay, the life cycle, they don't live very long. They only live about a year. So the adult shrimp go offshore, that's where they spawn, and then the juvenile shrimp make their way up the rivers into the estuary. And if we think about an estuary, does anybody know what an estuary is? What's an estuary?
We had guesses for where fresh and saltwater meet.
Very good. Yep. So an estuary is basically where the ocean water, obviously from the ocean, and the fresh water from rivers meet. And estuaries are really important nursery grounds. A lot of organisms, blue crab, shrimp, use it as a protection place and what we call a nursery. So estuaries are incredibly important. So the shrimp spend the first several months, 4 months, maybe even a little bit longer in the estuary growing. And as they grow, they molt, they shed that exoskeleton. And as they develop into adults, they go into deeper water. But again, they only live about a year or so. There is a disease that affects the shrimp here along the coast of Georgia. If anyone's ever heard of black gill disease, there are scientists currently studying that. And what happens with the black gill disease is that there's a protozoan that attacks the gills of the shrimp, and it impedes the respiration, so it stresses that shrimp out. So the shrimp wants to molt more frequently. And if you think about the molting process of arthropods, that group with jointed appendages, in terms of molting, that's a very high energy activity. And so the respiration of the shrimp are impacted. All right, very good. So let's kind of move on to some other organisms. We'll stick with the smaller organisms. Does anybody know what this is? I'm going to try to get it out of its shell. Who knows what this organism is? Very common here. There's several species of this particular organism. You tend to find them in the mud flats, on the oyster reefs.
Yeah, so we had guesses for whelk, crab, and hermit crab.
Okay, good. All right, so if you guessed hermit crab, that's exactly it. This is a striped hermit crab. Oh, it just popped right back in. So this is a hermit crab that's actually using the shell of an organism this is actually this Georgia state seashell, the knobbed whelk, and we call it a knobbed whelk because of these knobs here on the spires. But the striped hermit crab, it molts. Just like the shrimp, as they grow, they molt. You can see its claws. That's pretty cool, and its antennae, which it uses to sense around. It's got 2 eyes that are way out on stalks. But the hermit crab has an exoskeleton throughout its body, with the exception of its belly, and it's soft. And so that's why hermit crabs use the shell of a whelk to help defend itself. So it pops in. So as that hermit crab grows, it's going to have to continuously find larger and larger shells. That's pretty cool. All right. Let's move to how about we move to some fish species? You can see some things swimming around here. Well, maybe before we do that, let's do one more invertebrate. This is a cool one. We already talked about redbeard sponge. And what do you notice that's on the surface of this organism?
We had people noticing the same sponge on the back of that organism.
Awesome. Yep, that's redbeard sponge. And remember I mentioned when redbeard sponge starts out, it's kind of small and crusting, and then as it matures, it gets those elongated parts to it. So this is actually another type of crab, very common here on the coast of Georgia. This is a spider crab. And a spider crab is a perfect example of a crawling crab. You see the pointy legs? You see the points at the very end of the legs? That's indicative of a crawling crab, as opposed to, say, a blue crab, which I'll show here shortly. Blue crabs have swimming paddles. They're in this larger group called portunids, swimming crabs. So whenever you see pointy legs like that, that tells you pretty much that it's a crawling crab. And spider crabs, again, very common here on the coast of Georgia. One defense mechanism is that they decorate themselves. And you see that this juvenile, which is pretty small, it has little spines on it, but in order to protect itself even more, kind of camouflage itself, it uses the sponge, it'll use pieces of algae, and it'll attach or kind of glue those materials, those organisms to its exoskeleton. So that's just another form of camouflage, another way to defend themselves. All right, well, let's move on to some of the fish species. I know there was a question earlier about what type of fish do we collect in our trawls, and as Todd mentioned, you never know what you're going to get in a trawl. That's kind of the exciting part. So this is one that we caught today. One of the things that I'd like to start out with is when I teach students and teach them about sort of the biology of organisms, one of the things that I always teach them is that if you look at the external features of an organism, it could be a bird, it could be a snake, it could be a fish. But if you look at the external features of that particular organism, it's going to tell you a story. And it's going to tell you a story about how that organism makes its living, meaning how does it move? How does it see? How does it protect itself? If we think about fish, where might it live in the water column? Who might be the predators? So when we think about fish, who can maybe shout out to Ipsito some external features of a fish? Let's focus on the fish. What are just some external features?
We had people notice the big eyes, the spot, the fins, and then also the false eye and scales.
Okay. Awesome. Yep. So external features, it could be if you look at the body shape, that's going to tell you something. The fins, okay, particularly the tail fin might tell you a little bit about the speed within a particular species of fish. So we've got fins, we've got the dorsal fin, the pectoral fins, we've got the eyes. If we look at the location of the mouth, that tells you something too in terms of where it feeds. So again, by looking at those external features, it's going to tell you a story about how that organism makes its living. So who knows what species of fish this is? This is a very popular recreational fish. This is a juvenile. They get much larger. But does anybody know the species of this particular fish? And I'll give you a hint. Look behind the operculum, that flap that covers the gill. What do you notice?
We had a couple people say spot, and then someone else guessed bass.
Oh, okay. Well, whoever guessed spot, that's exactly right. This is a very common recreational fish. Spot, it's in the drum family. And what's really cool about spot, and a relative I'm going to show you here in a minute, the croaker, is that they use muscles along their air bladder, their air sac, and they kind of make this drumming noise or croaking noise. But this is a spot. It's an opportunistic feeder. If we look at its mouth, okay, and we pull down its mouth, it's not going to cooperate. But this is a bottom feeder. It's what we call a superior mouth. So the upper jaw hangs out over the lower jaw. And that's going to tell you that it likes to feed on the bottom. All right, we've got another fish here. This is a really cool fish too. It's a little lively, so it's jumping around. Anybody know what this particular fish is? It's got a voracious bite. Any guesses?
Yeah, so we had guesses come in for blenny, mud skipper, and puffer.
Oh, look at that. It's puffing up. So whoever said puffer is exactly right. This is a northern puffer, and that's a defense mechanism. Isn't that cool? So look at the coloration, okay? We call that counter shading. On the bottom, it's light, and on the top, it's dark, and it's got some bands here on the side, but this is a puffer. And when we call that counter shading, what that means is that if there's a predator swimming below the animal, that light upper lit surface kind of blends in with the light of the surface of the water. If the predator is swimming above this particular fish, then that dark coloration blends in with the bottom. So that's a puffer. I'm going to go ahead and just show it one more time because it's puffing up again, and then we're going to release it. Very cool. We have another fish that's blows itself up as well called the striped burrfish, and we weren't able to get one of those today, but that's pretty cool. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? There's another fish. I'm going to go with some of the flat fishes. This is what we would call a flatfish. This is a really interesting fish. Anybody know the name of this one? Any guesses, Ipsita?
Yes, so we had guesses for flounder and sole.
Oh, okay, relatives. It's a relative. This is actually called a hog choker, H-O-G, hog choker. Okay, and it's a flatfish. It's interesting, if you run your fingers down one way, it's very smooth. And if you run your finger the other way, it's very rough. It feels kind of like sandpaper. But what do you notice about the underside of that hog choker? What color is it?
It's white.
Yeah, it is white. Again, that counter shading. So these are bottom dwellers, and another name that we call bottom dwellers are benthic. This is a hog choker. You can see the eyes right here, okay? And underneath you can see the mouth and the light coloration. So that's called a hog choker. Here's another, if I can grab it, another flatfish that's common here along the coast of Georgia. This is a black-cheeked tonguefish. See how long and slender it is? Okay, a black-cheeked tonguefish. Again, dark on the top and light on the bottom, counter shading, so defense mechanism. And a lot of times what these flatfish species will do is they'll bury themselves in the sediment and just have their eyes sticking out. And what we call ambush predators. So they'll kind of lie in wait for a prey to swim by, and they'll ambush it. That's a black-cheeked tonguefish. All right, let's see what else we have. I think I've got a couple more things here to show you. This is one that we'll actually be able to hear on our hydrophones, or we're going to demonstrate here shortly. Anybody know the name of this particular fish? Look how globulous it is. It's brown and dark. Any guesses?
We had guesses for toadfish, batfish, and a more specific guess for oyster toadfish.
Ah, very good. Oyster toadfish. Sometimes people call it toadfish, but we call it oyster toadfish. And usually they call them oyster toadfish because that's where they like to hang out in the oyster reefs. So when we think about the oyster reefs here along the coast of Georgia, they're intertidal, meaning that they live or exist between the tides. So if I were to go out and ask you, go collect some oysters, what you would have to do is go collect them in between the tides. Whereas up north, they tend to be subtidal or under the tides. So oyster fish, along with other species of fish like red drum and trout, they're residents, or they can be transients of that oyster reef. So some of them, they're transients, they move into that oyster reef, they forage, they feed, they do whatever they need to do, and then they leave. Where residents kind of stick around all the time. But yeah, this is an oyster toadfish. They get much, much larger than this. So keep this in mind, because again, we're going to do a hydrophone demonstration. So now you know what it looks like. Look at the mouth of that thing. Let me see. Check that out. That's cool. All right, I'm going to let this go. All right, I think we've pretty much covered most of the animals that we've collected this morning. Are there any other specific questions that maybe we take a question or two, Ipsita?
Yeah, so we had a couple of questions come in. What's the most exciting sea critter you have caught?
Ooh, I would have to say most exciting was when we were trawling one time. I'm going to go back to the video. When we were trawling one time, we caught a stingray that was a couple 100 pounds. And so we got it up on board of the deck, and then we weren't quite sure how we were going to get it off the deck. So we actually had to kind of shoo it into the net and pull the net back up and put it back into the water. So that was really exciting. That was fun.
And then going off of what you just said, have you ever caught any squids, turtles, sharks, etc.?
Caught all of them. So sea turtles are a little tougher to catch in the trawl because they're faster than the net. We usually run about 3 knots, and sea turtles can kind of outswim that, which is a good thing because, as Todd mentioned, we really don't want to catch the sea turtle. But we do catch sharks, from black tip to bonnet head to sharp nose. We catch lots of different rays, Atlantic, southern, butterfly rays. And as I mentioned, every time you go out, it's something different. And if we think about the seasonality of things too, we catch different species at different times of the year. So it's a lot of fun.
And then do you ever catch any debris?
Yes. Unfortunately, we call that marine debris. Anything that's man-made, put into the marine environment. Todd and Kayla and I were out about a month ago, and we caught a crab pot. It was a derelict crab pot that had lost its tether and was rolling around the bottom of the Wilmington River. But we also collected in the net a lounge chair. We've caught bowling balls, a microwave, all sorts of different things. So there's a lot of debris out there.
All right, that's awesome. I think we're gonna head back over to the PowerPoint now, if that's good with you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I'm ready. So this is some kind of a quiz. Hopefully you'll be able to see it okay. But there are some different organisms that we've put in our culling trays. And if you could just guess them, Ipsida's going to tell you in a minute which species of organism they are. All right. So if you guess croaker, weakfish, spot, and squid, you're good. And then to the right, there's some other shrimp, and way back in the right-hand corner, those are star drum. But great. All right. So let's shift gears for a minute. We've been talking about the Sea Dawg and the conservation research and education that we do on our 43-foot trawler. Let's shift gears to our fleet of skiffs. We have 4 24-foot Carolina skiffs that we do the same kinds of things on, mostly research, conservation, and education. So some of the conservation efforts involve using the skiffs to do spring and fall migratory shorebird counts. And this footage was actually taken this past May. In the background, you can see spawning horseshoe crabs, and in the foreground, you can see lots of migratory shorebirds, ruddy turnstones, red knots, and some plovers. And these migratory shorebirds time their migration from South America up to the Arctic in the spring with the spawning of the horseshoe crab. Because the horseshoe crab releases eggs, and that's food and fuel for those migratory shorebirds to get up to the nesting grounds. So we do conservation efforts. In terms of our education, this is footage from our Fishing for Fun Marine Science Camp. It's a great opportunity to get the kids out on the water. You know, we get some students that have never been on a boat. They've never been fishing. So we get them out, they fish, they learn fishing regulations. We do catch and release. They learn about the different species and a lot about the natural history. We also take students to more remote areas. There's lots of barrier islands here on the coast of Georgia, and some of them you can only get to by boat. And so we take students out on our skiffs to explore not only the tidal creeks and sounds, but also the barrier islands like Wausau and Ossabaw. We do dolphin studies with students, and this is a really good time in which students can learn about dolphin behaviors. And so they learn everything from breaching to muddying to spy hopping. So it's a great opportunity for them to go out and not only look for dolphin, but we're always looking for other organisms, whether it be bald eagles or sea turtles or any other thing that's on the surface of the water. We also involved in microplastic research. Here are a couple of our citizen scientists who help me monthly. They go out monthly to the backside of Tybee and out to Wilmington and Skidaway rivers, and we sample the water. We're looking for microplastics, which are small pieces of plastic less than 5 millimeters in size. We have summer students. This is one of our summer students who was interested in microplastic research, and so we would take her out to study some of the oysters. She would collect oysters to look for ingestion of microplastics, and she'd also sample the water as well. So thanks to the Friends of the Aquarium, we were recently able to purchase hydrophones, a couple of hydrophones. And hydrophones, if you don't know what a hydrophone is, it's basically a piece of equipment that allows us to listen to sounds under the water. And we call that soundscaping. And so these hydrophones, which Todd's going to demonstrate here in a few minutes, allows us to listen to anything that's underneath the surface of the water. And so when we think about, well, what can produce sounds, it can be natural. So fish, marine mammals like dolphin, whales, and even invertebrates, which we'll demonstrate here in a minute. Those sounds can also be man-made. They could be from boats or military sonar or underwater construction. So hydrophones and soundscaping, well, soundscaping in general is a relatively newer field. There's not a lot known about what the sounds that fish make or marine mammals make, some of the smaller organisms as well, including invertebrates. So soundscaping is a really cool tool to figure out a little bit about the natural history of organisms that live under the water. Maybe documenting some of their behaviors like migration, how they move from one place to another, how they social interact with one another, and the sounds that they make. So we're going to go to the next slide. Ipsita's going to lead this slide. There are 4 images here, and what we've done is we've collected audio files using those 2 hydrophones, and Ipsita's going to play each one, and after she plays each one, then you're going to guess what made that noise or that sound.
All right, so what do you guys think made that sound? And we have answers coming in for the Sea Dawg, and you guys are absolutely right. Here's the next one. All right, so we had guesses come in for snapping shrimp. And again, you're 100% correct. Here's the third one. And with this one, you will hear the snapping shrimp, but try to listen to what's in the background for this. All right, and again, you guys got it correct. It is the oyster toadfish. And the last one. And yes, that was the dolphins.
All right, well, before Ipsita plays this soundscape, this is something that we put together. Todd and I went out and we got some audio files of dolphin. It was a pod of dolphins, so we put the hydrophones into the water, and this is what we came up with. So you need to listen to the clicks and the squeaking. Cool. That's cool. All right. All right. Well, thanks, Ipsita, for helping me with that. What we're going to do is we're going to turn it over to Todd to do a live demonstration of the hydrophones that we use out in the field.
Okay. Thank you, Dodie. Thank you, Ipsita. I'm going to do a demonstration of these hydrophone kits that we acquired as a gift from the Friends of the Aquarium. We got 3 of these kits. And it's a pretty powerful research tool if you think about it. It's almost like giving a set of eyes to underwater that you cannot see through, just like our rivers. You know, we have green, brown rivers, and it's kind of hard to send scuba divers down or snorkelers down and see what's down there. And so now we're going to turn our eyes into ears and listen to what is swimming around down there. Not every fish, not every organism makes a noise, but a lot of them do. And we can tell how many are down there, whether there's a few or none or a lot, just by the sound. So I'm going to go through the parts of the hydrophone kit real quick. This is a little speaker. It could be Bluetooth or just plugged in. This is actually the microphone. This is the hydrophone. It's sealed so that it's waterproof, and then it goes underwater to a long cable. We have about 40 feet of cable, so we can send it down pretty deep and hear what's going on. And the only other part we have is this is a digital recorder. So this is just basically a way of piping the sound into a memory card so that we can then transfer the files later on the computer, then analyze the sound files. So I've already got one of these hydrophones in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up the speaker, and I'm going to put the speaker near my microphone so that you guys can hear it. And let's just kind of observe and see what we can hear. You might hear something that sounds like knocking, like somebody knocking at a door. Those are species of fish. There's definitely some snapping shrimp. Sometimes you hear a real loud pop. That's a snapping shrimp that's close to the microphone. Actually, you might even hear a motor running. If I look off to my right, to the east, there's a boat coming. So let's listen. You're going to hear that boat get louder and louder. Does everybody hear that? There's a boat very close. It's taking off. If you think about it, there's a lot of man-made noise underwater as well. You have pump sounds of pumps. You have boats going by, sometimes large ships. And research shows that these sounds can actually have an effect on the natural behavior of organisms, whether it's their ability to navigate, or their ability to find each other or feed. So just to give you an idea, those boat noises going by, they're several hundred yards away, and you can still hear them underwater. So sound travels very far underwater. That's pretty neat. I don't know if we're going to get another quiet moment without the engines, but let's see if we can hear some more fish. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to turn that down. So that's pretty neat. So we heard some snapping shrimp. We heard some clicking and drumming, like some small drums, maybe some croaker. Could have been some spot. But yeah, thanks for joining me and the demonstration of the hydrophone. And I'm going to pass you off now to Ipsita. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd. If you had fun today, then I hope you will consider joining us next Tuesday at 11 a.m. for barnacles, sea squirts, and algae. Oh my! In addition, every Thursday at 2 p.m., we have a virtual series for families with children ages 4 to 8 years old, and this week is all about horseshoe crabs. This is the first summer that we have done virtual programs, and your feedback is incredibly valuable for shaping what these programs look like moving forward. Please take 1 minute to fill out the survey in the chat box. The chat box will disappear when we end the meeting, so go ahead and click that link now or copy and paste into a new window so that you have it for after the meeting. I do want to give a big thank you at this time for any friends in the audience, as your donations and support help us offer educational programming this summer. And if anyone is interested in becoming a friend, the application is on our website. You can also stay connected with us after this program by attending other public programs, following us on social media, or learning about our volunteer and internship opportunities. Additionally, if you had any questions, feel feel free to reach out to us and we will answer them as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us and see you next week.